Welcome to episode 22 of Paranormal Unwrapped with Krista Raisa and Jack Roth. Krista is a channel teacher and artist, an investigative journalist, author, and award-winning filmmaker. Today we are discussing the symptoms of extraterrestrial contact. Oh boy.
That's
I'm
a good
excited
one.
for this topic. What do you think?
Yeah, I am very well, it's a tough topic to talk about because people experience whatever kind of contact, right? Close encounters, they could be abducted, or just have fleeting encounters. Some people could just see a UFO, and if it's close enough, they can suffer from, radiation burns, things like that, right? But then it gets more intense as if you have close encounters and you're abducted. So yeah, this should be interesting.
Mm-hmm. So there are definitely some clear, obvious ones. I mean, I think our viewers have probably seen a couple ET films, right, viewers? So the classic scenario, which we've mentioned in a previous episode. But what about the biological ones? There are different places for implants that people say they put in their bodies, and some of these are supposed to assist, or some are not so fun. For instance, the joints are common places, the nasal cavity around the head. And so I definitely think if let's say you had a biological implant that's even if it's supposed to assist you, it might, how do you know that you have an implant besides someone actually taking it out of your physical body? And
Right.
Are some of these symptoms of ascension, right? Nosebleeds is a common one.
Mm-hmm.
And when is it ETs? When is it just allergies? When is it a planetary shift in the photon belt, or a solar flash?
Which I just read about. You sent me an interesting article on that, right? Well, the Earth's out of balance a little bit. There's a solar flare. I mean, there's allergy season. But I mean, I think, here's the thing. The common denominator is that someone has, either consciously or subconsciously, is having a ET experience. They're either seeing a UFO in the sky, and it's close enough so that it's having a physical impact on them, or they're an experiencer, they're being abducted. And then is when you get all those other things. One of the interesting things that we experienced when we were doing the Stan Romanek film is that he had one or two implants taken out. And how he knew it is you kind of have a bump under your skin, and it could be a little bruised. It could be a little bit irritating. And what's really interesting is that you're right. It's half mechanical and half biological. It's like this combination of the two, because if it was totally mechanical implant, the body would reject it outright, right? So the body would try to get it out of the skin. That's the normal body's reaction, our body's defense mechanism. But by making it biological, it stays in the body. Now, some implants are more successful than others, but some have them up in their sinus cavities. Some have them on their thighs. They're all over, but you feel, and a lot of people after being abducted, they have serious sinus problems. They come back with nosebleeds, like you said, and then they have these sinus issues, and then, if they go to the doctor and they put a scope up there, they can see this thing up there. It's like, well, what did you accidentally snort? What did you accidentally inhale? Because the doctors have no clue, right? They're like, well, what did you do? They're asking you what you did, but you didn't do anything. You're like, I don't know how it got there, right? Mm-hmm. And if something's sticking out of your skin, there's a bump, and then you get people put you could put a Geiger, not so much a Geiger counter, but like a tri-field meter, and there's this electromagnetic field associated with it, so there's movement, right? And then you're like, well, what the heck's in my body, right? And then obviously Dr. Lear was the leading doctor who was taking these things out of people, but that's just one aspect of the physical symptoms of having ET contact, right? I mean, the psychological symptoms go on and on too, but as far as the physical symptoms, you have, what have you heard about? And then I'll tell you what I've researched and, you know, experienced through the stuff we've done.
Yeah.
But what are the more common ones that you've heard about? I mean, that people complain about?
Probably having strange dreams and wondering if it's really happening. Eh, whereas you would have a cathartic dream, a fear dream, a wish fulfillment dream, and some sort of lucid dream where you can pull out real information, or you are in a scenario with someone else and that person has that same experiences you, a co-dreaming experience. Obviously, outer space dreams, extraterrestrial dreams, visiting spacecraft, or being in some sort of simulation that you feel is a hologram. Like, imagine you're in this sort of alternate world and everything is fake in that alternate world. You know it's fake, and something greater, some sort of greater message is trying to be communicated to you through your psychological filters to not scare you. How would you know something like this? How would you explain to people that um, I'm being contacted through the fourth dimension in my dreams? The Ryan Council keeps talking about this. They talk about, they said in the latest channeled message that we're doing collective agreements. The mass consciousness having collective agreements on a planetary level, and that's one type of consciousness to consider. So then there's the individual's experience, the shared dreams, the cosmic dreams, and I'm no expert on dream symbolism, but some people have really shamanic dreams as well. And you know, you're in this empty place, and you feel that somebody's watching you. What is that? What is that one?
Right. Right. And what's weird is the dream itself at that time could be the abduction. The abduction can seem like a dream. So not only are you being abducted and it seems you're in a dreamlike state, then it's post abduction, you're also having, all of a sudden you're having these weird dreams and you're like, well, are they still communicating with me? Am I now, did they open something up in my brain that now I'm capable of communicating in my dreams and having these dreams that I've never had before? And, you know, it's weird because it's so hard to describe when you haven't been through it. It really is 99% of the time, and almost 100% of the time at first, it's a horrible experience to go through because you don't know what's happening to you. And many people, they say they get to the point where they're good with it and they're star seeds and they have a role to play and, you know, on the ascension of the planet, and they get to that point. That's good for them. But a lot of people don't get to that point, right? So they suffer from the anxiety, they suffer from post-traumatic stress, and these are the psychological symptoms. But you know what's funny? Let's say it's funny, but interesting. So let's say, for example, you have a very strange night and you have these what you think are dreams, but you know they weren't dreams, and you think you were abducted, but you don't have all your memories, right? Because they're screening those out anyway. So now you're like, what's going on? But not on now. On top of that, you wake up with a headache, a nosebleed, scars, scoop marks, rashes, burns. I'm not saying all together. Like these are the different things that people have, right?
Yeah.
Migraines. If you are indeed being abducted by an extraterrestrial biological entity, you can only imagine what you're being exposed to while you're in this craft, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can only imagine, right? So what is happening to your body? What kind of things could happen to your body that they're not even, it's a side effect of what they're really doing. So let's say they're doing reproductive experiments. So you come back down and you're sore in your stomach. If you're a girl, I mean, this is what we heard, like, oh, you know, I was bleeding down there, or I was very uncomfortable. And obviously then all of a sudden you can become pregnant. And that's an obvious physical symptom, right? I mean, that's the ultimate physical symptom. But besides that, so you come back and you're like, what happened to me? Something physical happened to me. This isn't just a dream. Something physical happened, right? I mean, that's got to be overwhelming. And we know it's overwhelming.
Especially for, I love your compassion, because you have so much compassion for people having these strange experiences, and you're also making it okay for them to get upset. And I love that the permission slip, it's okay to be angry and sad and have feelings about these things. But I keep hearing how the human is sort of genetically programmed to resist this type of experience. That if we, let's say, just say we are a quote unquote slave race and there's an evil Illuminati controlling the world that's been in power for 300,000 years because of these Nibiruns that made us mine for gold here, or Atlantis fell or whatever, then wouldn't you think that they have somehow genetically also manipulated the human prototype here to be workers, to be asleep, to be unconscious? They would be very smart in that way. And while they might not have been entirely evil, we were under their control or influence. There are many methods to keep people also psychologically hypnotized and oppressed to control them. And so,
Right.
if that's all true, then there must be some sort of there must be a threshold or a resistor that we've been like we when people talk about abundance blocks, for example, it's like some people have different thresholds of allowing and quote unquote manifesting good things into their reality, including extraterrestrial experiences. So it would only make sense as a manipulative species to make sure that you are go into total fear when you're having contact, when you're reaching a threshold of supernatural abilities, you're making more money, you're healing, you're having good relationships, you're experiencing more love in your life, all the stuff that we weren't allowed to do and we're now moving into spontaneously or from our own willpower and our own spiritual development or from the benevolent ET guidance. And so, I've heard people saying they've dreamt of me on a spaceship being held down in these metal things and kicking grays. I don't have this conscious memory and recall that I've been in so much fear, and I believe them because it does scare me. Every time I channel, my ego is frightened for tons of reasons. And so, what do you do with that? If it's like going to the doctor, and as a kid, and you get your blood taken, it's scary. You start freaking out and crying at a needle because this never happened to you before. And so, of
Right.
course, yeah, so that resistance will create that. And I think I'm repeating myself.
No, it's fear of the unknown. It's fear. No, you're absolutely right. And there's a DNA component to human beings. We know psychologists today write books about how most human beings are comfortable following or just taking orders, right? And why is this, right? Why is this in our DNA? But I think there's other factors that, if they did, the Illuminati, quote unquote Illuminati, mess with our DNA so we could be worker bees way back and mine for gold or whatever that was, then something didn't take, right. One thing about human beings that's special, I think, is our free will. And our free will and our ability to continue to love and have compassion almost always trumps all that other stuff. So, and I believe that there's other DNA stuff going on where there's a percentage of us who can't be manipulated that way. I truly believe that. I'd love to do more research on that. Even if it's 5 or 6% of the population that can't be brainwashed, that can't be manipulated, that will not, will smell a rat every time and not put up with it. Like what is that about? Why are we like that? But yeah, I think that's really interesting what you say, because why, if we, of course, we're going to resist being abducted. I mean, that's fight or flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, free will. We don't want to be under someone's mind control, right? You hear a lot of times when people are abducted, they're controlled. They can't do anything about it. And if they start to kick or punch, then they really just kind of put their hand on their forehead or they do something, and then all of a sudden you're calm, you're relaxed, or you're put under. So they're not going to take the chance of you hurting them physically,
Right.
especially with the little grays. So, and this is what we hear over and over again. So, we're being manipulated. We're being manipulated psychologically, emotionally, and physically. So, right. Yeah, we're going to rebel against that. It's a natural reaction. But, again, what are we left with afterwards? So it happens. And yeah, I think, thanks for mentioning that, Krista, too. The whole idea of, yes, we have to be compassionate about people who have these experiences, even if we have never had these experiences, because you have to always put yourself in other people's shoes. If you wake up you can only imagine the horror of having to go through an abduction experience.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even imagine it. And you know what? People are experiencing these things. They're having the anxiety. They're getting the post-traumatic stress. And other human beings, we have an obligation to, as fellow humans, to show empathy for what they're going through. But also, you're right. People have to go through the anger, the fear, the resentment, the sadness. You go through all these emotions, right? It's normal human emotions that you should be able to go through.
Certainly, and the reports suggest that a lot of these ET are not having a similar range of emotions that we are, that they're somehow more in control of them. And if you look at the mass consciousness, would you agree that people tend to be more reactive than kind of come from an inner centered place of responding? At least, living in America, it just seems that people are very forthright and vocal about, because we have freedom of speech here, so we're very much verbally kind of saying stuff. And what we're really talking about is that inner condition, but also the physical body. And so Patrick McGeehan says we're in a health revolution right now. And I noticed, because a lot of people buy my health products or my health assisting products on my Etsy shop. So a lot of the millennials are concerned about that. I know people, Generation X, are very health conscious, supplement industry and so on. And, do we have a fear about, bacteria and things like that? I think these are all very valid things to contemplate and potentially worry about. But if indeed we're being assisted by beings who are more evolved, you would think that they have also evolved clinically, and that they have some clean procedures. I would like to believe that the stories being told are more elaborate and horrific than they are in regular life. They certainly, I've heard of very barbaric sorts of experiences, and it's hard when you're the listener. It's hard to tell. Well, are they just elaborating and coloring it that way, or did that really happen to them in that way? And so there is value in holding space and listening to people also, but having some sort of, like you said, that human empathy. I think they're mostly wanting to be understood, like you said, step into their shoes. Imagine if somebody pulls out a long wire out of your spine, but then what if a diamond crystal falls out of your friend's mom's spine when she gets a massage? What is that?
Right.
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I like to refer people to Mary Rodwell's book Awakening, one of her latest books, because she interviews the star children, and they're having beautiful experience. I wrote about in my book Starseed Survival. In the very beginning, I was reporting on they have what's called experiencer cafes at these UFO conference, and people react really differently. One lady said she's from the Pleiades and she couldn't wait to go back, and her and her daughter are Pleiadian. This army guy who was stationed in Iran and came back, he was so curious. He was on an investigative journey to find out the truth, because he's like, well, he's in the military and this is going on. And then there was this person who was freaking out and they had to grab the microphone, walk away, come back, grab the microphone, because they had to tell you all the detail of the whole thing. It's like the best thing that just happened. Mind blown. And yeah, so people are really different about it. People are,
right.
It's like
you say, as we're evolving, right? If we are, then we're getting more. I would always imagine there would be a difference from, a guy being abducted in the middle of Kansas, who's an old school, doesn't believe in any of this, and all of a sudden, next thing, he's being taken by these little gray people, and he's grabbing for his, one of his 8 guns and trying to kill them all, as opposed to a Buddhist monk at a monastery in Nepal who's being abducted and is probably like, oh yeah, this is great. I was hoping this would happen. Let's do this. Let's do this.
That's really funny.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just all the way your perception. But at the same time, I don't think being abducted against your will in any way, shape, or form could be a good thing unless you're aware of the fact that you agreed to do it. And maybe these kids that Mary Rodwell's talking about, they're at that point, if they're star seeds and they're indigo children and they're the next step in our evolution, maybe they already understand that. They have a better understanding of that, and therefore they're not scared. I don't know.
Yeah, but what do you say when an 8-year-old says he comes from the pumpkin planet in the 9th dimension? He's talking about the toroidal field of the planet, which looks like a pumpkin.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Really, and he doesn't. We have to listen. We have to listen to the old dudes that live in in the middle of nowhere in the RV, and we also have to listen to the 4-year-olds who say, I have parents who exist in outer space, and document this stuff. And the Orion Council says we've got to communicate our stories with one another so that we can come to sort of collective agreements about what is happening. But the main point is, what we want everyone to know is this is going on. Most people who are emotional about it and responding in a very colorful way is some people ask for this stuff to happen and it actually does. And some people didn't ask for it and it actually does. And some people, it's ongoing all the time. They kind of want it to stop, or they're confused about it. And this is why there are therapy groups, discussion circles, storytelling, movies being made. If you go look on Netflix, these mainstream, sorry to say, but these mainstream Hollywood romance flicks are flopping, and these like Terminator and Gemini Man, they flopped. People are watching Sabrina, Supernatural. They're watching magical stuff, Wachowski stuff, and the creators of Matrix, and so on. And it's like we have to also accept we're not in the past. So we that the change is taking place. We're not in the same place we were even since last year. Time for
that's a great point. Really good stuff. I mean, and I wonder also too, because, one of the things that it's tough to talk about, because when people, we've spent a good part of the last 7 years in the realm of abductions, right? So it could get dark. And I remember at, was it in Phoenix? Yeah, you were there, but it was before we were talking to and I respect her, Jacqueline Smith, who's a hybrid experiencer, and you know her. She's a really cool person. I mean, interesting person to no end. I'd love to sit for 4 hours and just talk to her. Yeah. But we were gonna have her in the documentary, but she wasn't living. Logistically, it didn't work. So we never interviewed her for the film. So when we screened the film in Phoenix at the conference, she watched it, and then we asked for her feedback. And one of the things she said, and she's a long time abductee and for years and years, so she's had a long time to come to terms with what's happened to her and who she is. But she's like, I got to be honest, I thought it was a great film, but I thought it was a little dark. There was no real positive stories about people being abducted. And I told her, Lori Wagner and I were like, to be honest with you, Jacqueline, the people we talked to, for the most part, really for 90-something% of the people, it was not a good experience. They were either my labs, or they were all being abducted against their will. They're becoming pregnant. These aren't pleasant experiences for people. Now, I know that there are some people like yourself that say, well, yeah, in the end, this is what's going on, but it took you time to get there. And I'd love to talk to her more. And I respected her feedback. And I realized after, I was like, well, yeah, I guess if you look at it and you watch the film, you'll say, well, gosh, and for the most part, it is a pretty negative experience. And I don't like to, the goal was to inform people, right? Knowledge is power. And we want people to understand that people are going through this. So the intent was a good one. But the reality of it is that it's not always a pleasant experience. So what I would ask you, Krista, is because you have, and I would love for you to ask the Orion Council this too. Like, okay, so people are being abducted. Not all ET races who are in contact with us are abducting people against their will. That's okay. So not everyone is, not all of them are. But for the ones who are, and they are doing these reproductive experiments, we know pretty much they're doing these reproductive experiments for some kind of hybridization program. Why is there another way to do this, or is this the only way to do this, or is it a question of lack of ethics and morals on the part of some of these ET races who are doing it, who don't feel like to them it's not a bad thing, but to us it's very traumatic? I don't know. That's something we've never been able to kind of wrap our heads around as we've interviewed all these people, and we want to believe that ultimately it's a good thing for humanity. But how do you justify that kind of have people having those harrowing experiences?
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
Right. So all I can say personally is that I don't have a full recall of what's happened to me. I think it has to do with allowing for the answers to come through and being actually psychologically ready, because the benevolent ones, they don't want to disturb our lives. So they want this to be as seamless as possible, because life is so precious, right? And part of learning about this is seeing the importance of things like gene manipulation. If you knew that one of the classic scenario was that these grays in the future, they outbreed their emotions, and so their race actually dies in the future. And so a lot of people believe they have come here from the future, they've incarnated back to fix stuff here. So people who feel more developed and somehow and feel like they're responsible to fixing things on the planet. There are many reasons you could be here because things messed up. You're fixing timelines, and it's this whole convoluted story. Or you messed up in Atlantis, you're here to fix things, or you're just here to benevolently, because a lot of this planet needs assistance. But there's so many things I want to say about this. And what I get from the Earth perspective, I went to college and we had a class by a Polish teacher. He was an exchange teacher, and he taught us a class on science fiction, SF. And SF, a lot of SF literature explains what they use somewhat slightly elements of horror, but there's this typical ongoing theme of the body being violated, and people have, this discomfort arises from the description. When you look at the movie Alien with Ripley, she has that alien baby burst out of her stomach. It's this element of horror, with a slight sexual undertone of it. But then there are nuances of feminism and all sorts of elements interwoven in this plot to teach us about ourselves. Really, we're reflecting on each other in this reality. And so when you have a planet that is due to wake up, the Orion Council has been saying that there are always spiritual beings that want to assist. So they're also talking about the spirit world. And so we have a physical world, and then we have a spiritual world. And some of these extraterrestrials are interdimensional. I know that I don't know everything about extraterrestrials, but I know about the belief systems on this planet. Every religion has an ascended master. And we're running out of time. I'm going on it. But every culture, if you look at it, they have their leaders. They have their miracle messiahs and so on who advanced. You had Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus Christ, and the Bodhisattvas and so on. And the Jewish leaders and the Egyptian pharaohs, and both the emerald tablets, they have this information has been here for how to go about this thing. And so I think we're still figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still figuring it out. And you guys, we are actually, that's the music. We're running out of time today. But we would love to know in the comments if you guys enjoy this topic. What are you having ascension symptoms? Are you having runny nose? And when is it when is it you going to visit a mothership? When is it just your imagination because you're bored? There's so many reasons why this is going on. Thanks for watching. Click like, stay subscribed, and we will see you guys next time. Check out J3 Films Extraordinary This Evening and the Ryan Council channel messed up on YouTube. Bye, guys.
All right.